2 weeks ago, I experienced something that still keeps me awake at night. Even now, when I hear a strange sound outside my bedroom, my mind immediately goes back to that night. Back to the moment I opened my eyes in the darkness and realized someone was watching me from beside my bed. At the time, I had only recently graduated from college. Like a lot of people trying to start life on their own, I was struggling financially. Rent prices were ridiculous, and the only house I could afford was located in a neighborhood that most people would avoid if they had any other choice. The area was rough, neglected, and constantly noisy. My neighbors on one side treated every night like a concert, blasting music so loudly that the walls seemed to vibrate. But as annoying as they weren't the ones who worried me. The people living on the other side of my house were far worse. 2 women lived there. One appeared to be in her 60s. She was cold, unfriendly, and carried herself with a permanent look of irritation. Every interaction with her felt uncomfortable. The second woman was younger, though not by much, and she seemed to suffer from severe mental problems. I never understood their relationship. Almost every week, I'd witness disturbing scenes from my front porch. The younger woman would be in the yard screaming, rocking back and forth with her arms crossed tightly against her chest. Sometimes she'd yell nonsense. Sometimes she'd cry. Other times, she'd simply stare into space while muttering to herself. The older woman would stand beside her, gripping her shoulders and trying to restrain her whenever she became too agitated. Occasionally, the younger woman would suddenly point directly at me. Then she'd whisper something to the older woman. The first few times it happened, I tried to ignore it. Eventually, it became impossible. There was something deeply unsettling about being silently watched by someone whose behavior was so unpredictable. Whenever I noticed her staring, I'd often head back inside and lock my door without even realizing I was doing it. Still, life went on. I worked, paid bills, and tried to convince myself that my neighbors were simply strange people dealing with difficult circumstances. Then came the night that changed everything. A night that started with loud arguments next door and ended with me barricading myself inside my own house while calling the police. It was a work night, and I had gone to bed earlier than usual. The moment I lay down, I could already hear shouting coming from next door. At first, it wasn't unusual. Noise from that house was common. But as the hours passed, the situation escalated. The younger woman was screaming at the top of her lungs. Furniture seemed to be scraping across floors. Objects slammed into walls. The older woman shouted back, sounding increasingly distressed and overwhelmed. The noise continued relentlessly. 10 minutes became 20. 20 became 40. Then nearly an hour passed. I buried my head under a pillow. I turned on a fan. I tried music. Nothing worked. Finally, frustrated and exhausted, I got out of bed. I marched across my yard and walked up to their front door. The shouting inside was still going strong. I knocked. No answer. I knocked harder. A moment later, the door swung open. The older woman stood there staring at me. Her expression wasn't friendly. "What the hell do you want?" she snapped. Trying to remain polite, I explained that I had work in the morning and asked if they could please keep the noise down. The woman's eyes narrowed. She lowered her head slightly and raised her eyebrows as if my request had personally offended her. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then movement appeared behind her. The younger woman entered the living room. The instant she saw me, her face twisted with anger. "How dare you?" she screamed. The words echoed through the house. "How dare you? How dare you?" She began moving toward the doorway. The older woman quickly grabbed her and held her back. I froze. The intensity of her reaction made no sense. I hadn't insulted her. I hadn't threatened her. I had only asked them to lower the noise. Yet she looked at me as if I had committed some unforgivable crime. The older woman continued restraining her while glaring at me. Without another word, she slammed the door directly in my face. The impact made me jump. I stood there for several seconds, staring at the closed door. The entire encounter had been bizarre, uncomfortable, almost surreal. Defeated, I headed back home. Oddly enough, the shouting stopped shortly afterward. The neighborhood finally fell silent. Relieved, I crawled back into bed. Within minutes, exhaustion pulled me into sleep. At the time, I thought the situation was over. I had no idea someone from that house would be standing inside my bedroom before sunrise. The first time I woke up, everything felt wrong. The room was dark and quiet. For a moment, I thought I had overslept. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 3 a.m. I sighed with relief and dropped my head back onto the pillow. Only a few more hours until morning. As I settled down, I thought I heard something from downstairs. A faint sound, a movement, maybe a creak. I wasn't sure. I sat up and listened. Silence. The house seemed completely still. Eventually, I convinced myself I had imagined it. I lay back down and drifted off again. The second time I woke up felt different. Far different. My eyes opened suddenly. The room remained completely dark. I checked my phone. Only 20 minutes had passed. I frowned. Something had awakened me. But what? Then I heard it. Breathing. Not my breathing. Someone else's. The sound was faint but unmistakable. A slow inhale. A slow exhale. Close. Very close. Every muscle in my body locked up. My heart immediately began pounding. I stayed perfectly still, listening. Again. Breathing. Somewhere inside the room. A wave of panic surged through me. I reached toward my bedside table, searching for my phone. My fingers finally found it. For a moment, I considered turning on the flashlight. But fear stopped me. Part of me didn't want to know what might be standing nearby. I scanned the darkness instead. Corner after corner. Wall after wall. Nothing. No silhouette. No movement. No visible intruder. Yet the breathing continued. Then I realized something. The sound wasn't coming from across the room. It was coming from beside the bed. Slowly, I turned my head. At first, I couldn't understand what I was looking at. There was a dark shape near the wooden frame. A black circle partially hidden beside the mattress. For one horrifying second, my exhausted brain struggled to process it. Then recognition hit me. That wasn't a shadow. It wasn't an object. It was a face. Someone was crouching beside my bed, watching me sleep. And that face belonged to the woman from next door. The moment I recognized her, everything exploded into chaos. My trembling thumb activated the phone's screen. A burst of light illuminated the darkness. The woman's face suddenly became visible. Her eyes were fixed directly on me. For a split second, neither of us moved. Then she screamed. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It wasn't a startled scream. It wasn't a normal human reaction. It was a piercing, animal-like shriek that erupted through the room and echoed off the walls. The instant it happened, I screamed too. Pure panic took over. I launched myself off the bed and ran for the bedroom door. My legs felt weak and uncoordinated. Halfway across the room, I stumbled and nearly crashed into the floor. I caught myself just in time. When I looked back, the woman was moving toward me. I don't know if she intended to attack me. I don't know what she wanted. All I knew was that she was inside my house, inside my bedroom, at 3 in the morning, and she was coming closer. I reached the door. My hands shook violently as I grabbed the handle. The door slammed shut behind me. Immediately, I heard movement on the other side. I didn't wait. I sprinted downstairs. Every step sounded deafening. My heart hammered so hard it felt painful. I reached the lower floor and locked the door leading upstairs. A second later, violent pounding erupted from above. Bang, bang, bang. The woman slammed against the door while screaming words I couldn't understand. The sounds echoed through the house. I backed away and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly that dialing emergency services became difficult. When the dispatcher answered, I nearly shouted over the noise. I explained that an intruder was inside my house, that the intruder lived next door, that she was mentally unstable. The pounding continued while I waited. Every minute felt endless. Then finally, flashing lights appeared outside. The police had arrived. For the first time since waking up, I felt a small sense of relief. But the night wasn't finished yet. Not even close. The officers entered the house and quickly took control of the situation. Within minutes, they had the woman restrained. As they escorted her outside, she continued shouting incoherent phrases and struggling against them. The scene attracted attention almost immediately. Lights switched on throughout the neighborhood. Doors opened. People stepped outside to see what was happening. Then the older woman emerged from next door. The moment she realized who the police had detained, she hurried toward them. She began pleading, begging them to let the woman go. The officers listened, but they weren't convinced. Regardless of the circumstances, someone had entered another person's home in the middle of the night. That wasn't something they could simply ignore. One of the officers pulled me aside to get my statement. I explained everything. The argument earlier that evening. The strange behavior. Waking up to find her crouched beside my bed. The officer listened carefully. Then he asked a question I hadn't expected. Do you want to press charges? Before I could answer, I felt someone staring at me. I turned. The older woman was watching. I've never forgotten that look. It wasn't fear. It wasn't concern. It was pure hatred. The kind of stare that makes your skin crawl. Her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that felt almost threatening. For several uncomfortable seconds, neither of us looked away. I suddenly felt very aware that she lived only a few feet from my house. Eventually, I told the officer I didn't want to press charges. The woman was clearly mentally ill, and I just wanted the nightmare to end. But even after hearing my answer, the older woman's expression didn't soften, not even slightly. The officers placed the younger woman into a patrol car and drove away. The older woman remained standing outside, watching me, watching my house, watching everything. Eventually, she turned and walked back home. I thought that was the end. Then, about 5 minutes later, I saw her leave again. She climbed into her car and drove off into the darkness. To this day, both women still live next door. Nothing like that has happened again. But every time I see the older woman, it's obvious she despises me. And every time I remember waking up to that face beside my bed, I reach the same conclusion. The younger woman wasn't just frightening. She was dangerous. And the longer I stay in this neighborhood, the more seriously I consider moving away.